Hey y'all, welcome back to another doll movie review. Today we're going to be taking a look at Why Do Ghouls Fall in Love from Monster High. If you guys have been following along, I've kind of been doing a series on my channel of watching the old Monster High media, and so far was not a fan of the webisodes. I really didn't like New Ghoul at School, but I did think that Fright On was pretty good, so I went into Why Do Ghouls Fall in Love with kind of an open mind, especially because it was going to be my first 3D animated Monster High media that I was watching, so I was kind of excited to see how that went. In general, I do have kind of mixed opinions. Obviously we're gonna get into it, but that's the short version. Is I kind of have mixed feelings about this one. Before we can talk about all of my opinions though, I do have to get my usual disclaimers out of the way. The first one is, as always, this is just my opinion, so if you guys disagree, totally cool, it's not a big deal, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And then just like with all of my other movie media reviews, I won't be using clips because I am scared of copyright, so I'll just be using screenshots to kind of get my point across or illustrate what I'm talking about. So sorry if that's slightly more boring, but I am a nervous human being. And then lastly, I will be talking about Why Do Ghouls Fall in Love in full detail. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, this is the only spoiler warning that I'm going to give, so just kind of be aware that I'm not going to be sugarcoating anything or not talking about anything. I'm just going to talk full detail, assuming that if you watch from this point on, you have seen the movie. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get into my thoughts. To start off with, I wanted to talk about kind of just everything visual about this movie, since like I said, it is the first 3D animated film from Monster High that I saw, and I really don't think that the animation is bad, but I don't think that it held up as well over time as the 2D animation. This isn't necessarily specific to Why Do Ghouls Fall in Love, I don't think it's a unique problem to this movie. I think it's kind of just the nature of the two mediums. Overall, I think as time goes on, 2D animation is probably more likely to hold up than the 3D animation. I could be wrong because I'm not an animation professional, but I just think that the 2D probably lasts a little bit better than the 3D, and it definitely did in the case of Monster High. But like I said, that's not something that I think is unique to this movie, so I'm not really complaining, I just wanted to point it out. That being said, I do think that the animation was pretty interesting, and it was very, very smooth to me. It did have this kind of bouncy quality. Like I said, I don't know animation, so I have no idea what the word for it is, but almost this floaty, I'm gonna I feel so silly just sitting here talking to a camera, moving my arms, but you know what I mean, where at the end of a movement, it almost felt like they would bounce, if their arm moved, it would kind of bounce into place. I have no idea if that was intentional or if there's a word for that, but I actually thought that it was a very interesting visual effect, whether it was intentional or not, so I kind of liked that part. I will say that the Monster High, dramatic proportions were a little bit more jarring to me in the 3D form versus the 2D form. Specifically, sometimes, the limbs and, the arms especially on these characters felt really, long and spindly and just a little bit creepy. That it's just something that's stylistic, and it's just a stylistic preference, so that's not really a critique, it's just something that I noticed. And to be fair, it is Monster High, so that creepy vibe is probably a good thing. But yeah, sometimes it was a little bit off-putting to me. That being said though, the off-putting was very much negated by the scenes that I thought were very, very well animated. The one that comes to mind instantly is the scene where you're first introduced to Cupid, where it pans out on her little broadcasting tower, and then you get a shot of just the microphone and her lips. I'll have it on screen so you guys can take a look at it. But I literally rewound the movie when I saw that because I just thought it was such a good shot. The colors were so good, and I just felt like it was really dynamic and interesting. So I really, really appreciated shots like that, and I think that there were a few more throughout the movie that I really enjoyed. So I guess overall, I had kind of mixed feelings, both good and bad, about the animation. This is a very calm section of the video, so we can go ahead and jump into some of the juicier stuff now. First, I want to talk about Claude because he's the best part of this movie, in my opinion. Up until this point, I hadn't really had any strong opinions about his character whatsoever, but this movie made me such a big fan of Claude. He's just such a good boyfriend to me. Why Do Ghouls Fall in Love revolves around Dracula's birthday coming up, so throughout the movie, Claude is trying to come up with different gifts for her, and he has a few options that end up getting turned down by Dracula and her friends. Personally, I think that they were all very thoughtful, but but like, I know some people aren't as big a fan of practical gifts. Obviously, Draculaura isn't. But I really, really loved that Claude kept trying. Like, when he realized she was unhappy with his first gift, he like kept trying to get her one that she would be happy with because he wanted to see her smile. He asked for advice from multiple people. Like, he was not afraid to put himself out there in the effort of like trying to be kind to Draculaura. And I just thought it was really, really sweet that he didn't give up, you know? Like I said, I think all of his options were good. I think Draculaura was being a little bit dramatic in this movie, but I just thought it was really, really cute, and it spoke a lot to his character that Claude was willing to be vulnerable and ask for help and keep trying to get gifts because he genuinely just wanted to make Draculaura's birthday special. I thought that was so sweet. The other thing that spoke volumes to me about Claude's character is that he is technically dumped by Draculaura in favor of Valentine. The audience knows that Draculaura is under a spell, but he doesn't know that at first. And so when he is dumped, he is super upset about it because he loves Draculaura. Like, he's very upset, but he doesn't like confront her. He doesn't try to argue with her. He doesn't go after Valentine. He just accepts her decision, or what he sees as her decision. And, you know, he's upset, but he kind of handles that separate from her. He doesn't go after her, which is just extremely respectful to me. But then as soon as he does realize that Draculaura is being taken advantage of and that she's like under a spell, then he will go to bat for her, and he like goes to fight Valentine because Valentine is hypnotizing Draculaura. And I just feel like, again, this spoke volumes of positive things about Claude's character. It felt very respectful. It felt very like consent focused, that he was willing to accept that Draculaura would leave him when he thought it was her choice, and then only when he realized it wasn't her choice did he try to do something about it. I was very, very impressed with Claude this movie. I feel like he was literally an ideal boyfriend. I cannot give him enough props. He was such a good guy this movie. Valentine, of course, is pretty much the opposite. I'm obviously not going to complain about him being a bad dude because that's the point. He's the villain. But I am going to complain about the fact that he doesn't really make sense. Some of you guys did warn me about this because in my last video about Phrydon, I complained about Crabgrass not really having a villain motivation, and you guys tried to warn me that I was also probably going to have some similar feelings about Valentine and other villains going through the series. And you weren't wrong. I thought I was prepared, but I definitely wasn't. It's so disappointing that Valentine really has no motivation whatsoever. Like, we know that he likes to date girls until they fall completely in love with him, and then he breaks up with them and breaks their heart, and it like somehow becomes a trophy for him. I don't really understand the physical part, but that's what he does. That's like his modus operandi, is he dates girls, makes them fall in love with him, and breaks their hearts. But that's all we get. Like, we don't know why he does that. We don't know why he feels compelled to break hearts. Like I said, he kind of gets a trophy for it, so you could say it's for a collection. But the motive behind this is really vague. Like, why do you want a collection of broken hearts? You know, like, we don't see anything behind that act. We don't see any reason for that act. I'm not really sure if this is something that is remedied in his diary, but even if it is, I don't think that that's an excuse for the movie to not cover it. Not everyone who sees this movie is going to go out and buy a doll, so like, there's no real reason for the movie to not explain this on screen, even if it's a very, very quick explanation. And then when you add that to the fact that Valentine's doll was not widely produced, it was an SDCC exclusive, even fewer people would have had the opportunity to buy it and therefore read the diary and make sense of what he does in the movie, assuming the diary explains what he does in the movie. So, in general, I don't think that the existence of Monster High Diaries negates the fact that the movie really dropped the ball in giving Valentine a proper motivation. The other thing that really, really irritated me about Valentine is his powers, and like the fact that we have no explanation for them whatsoever. First of all, he has these like 3 smoke creatures that follow him around, and they're just kind of there. They're never explained whatsoever. Like, I don't know if they are part of his powers and kind of extension of him, or if they are closer to other monsters, or if they're more like familiars. Like, there's literally no explanation whatsoever. I also found them extremely unnecessary. Like, I don't think they needed to be part of the movie, but especially without giving a reason for them to be there or an explanation as to why they're there. I just found it very confusing. The other thing is that as far as I know, and as far as we've seen in the other Monster High media that I've gotten through up to this point, Valentine is the only vampire with powers. Like, Draculaura doesn't have any special powers. None of the vampires in Fright On had any special powers. Valentine seems to be the only one who has any, like, magical capability in addition to just existing as a vampire and having, like, powers because of that. You know, like, beyond the turning into a bat, we don't see any other vampire that has either Valentine's ability specifically or just any sort of special power. So why is Valentine the only one who gets one? And I just want to know why, and also how. Like, was he born like that? Did he do something to earn these powers? Did he steal them? Are they, like, he has these glasses that show, you know, like, the heart reading, and it shows you how close the person is to falling in love with you. Are his powers directly connected to the glasses? Like, is it a magical object sort of situation? We just don't get to find out, and I just find it extremely frustrating that we never know, especially because if you want a super easy, like, answer, it could just be the magical glasses. Like, that's the simplest, easiest way to explain his powers that doesn't require a lot of lore or a lot of writing or anything like that. You could just say, oh yeah, he has these magic glasses that let this happen. But it's never said, you know, like, that could be the case, but it's never explicitly stated or even really implied to me that that is the source of his power. They seem more like a tool than the source. I don't know, I was very frustrated. And that is, like, magnified because Valentine is so overpowered, it's not even funny. Cupid says that one of her arrows isn't enough to break Valentine's spell, but Cupid's arrows are enough to make literally every other monster in Monster High fall in love with a random monster. Like, Cupid's arrows can overpower anybody else's brain and completely just overwrite their own choices and make them fall in love with somebody, but one arrow is not enough to break Valentine's hypnosis. So his powers are extremely strong. It would be bad enough that we didn't get an explanation for them if they were kind of mid-powers, but to have such strength behind his hypnosis and to have no explanation for it, I just think it's an egregious oversight that wasn't put into the movie or explained in any way whatsoever. Like, I think that Valentine has the capability to be an interesting villain. He is very villainous, like, he's very malicious. I think that he could be so interesting, but he's just not quite there. Like, both he and the movie would have been 10 times better if the audience had any sort of inkling as to where his powers come from and what his motivations are. I didn't really have enough to say about any other character to give them, like, their own section, so this little bit might be slightly more disorganized, I'm sorry, but there were plenty of characters that I wanted to touch on without, like, having a whole overarching section about them. So first of all is Toralei. Basically, I don't think that she needed to be in this movie at all. She kind of facilitates some of the drama that happens with Valentine, but her part very easily could have been written out. Like, she calls him and gets him to go to Monster High. That very easily could have been done by him just finding out that that's where Draculaura is, and he decides to go because he wants to finally get her broken heart. Toralei is just completely useless, and I feel like the screen time that she takes up would have been better used giving Valentine a proper backstory. Like, she's taking up villain screen time that should be given to Valentine, in my opinion. I do have very similar feelings about Ghoulia and her subplot in that I just think that it was unnecessary. The subplot with Ghoulia is that she is trying to pick between two zombie boys to kind of be her boyfriend, which is something that was already covered in the webisodes, and I know that that's something that has happened a few times now during the course of these movies, but I just find it kind of frustrating that we're rehashing old material, especially material as, like, boring as this. To be fair, maybe I wouldn't be so hard on Ghoulia if this movie didn't desperately need that runtime to pad out Valentine's character, but it does. So I'm upset about her subplot. Then we come to Frankie, and I'm gonna give all of the Frankie stands just, like, a quick warning here. This is very rapidly becoming a Gen 1 Frankie hate account, and I'm sorry about that. I know that she was a very, very popular character, but honestly, the more that I see of her on screen, the less I can understand why, because every moment that she is on screen, I'm just annoyed. Like, I'm not a fan, and I feel very badly, but the Frankie stans tend to be kind of a vocal group. I'm not trying to, like, insult you, I'm just saying, whenever I say I don't like Frankie, people tend to get a little bit upset, so if you don't want to hear the Frankie slander, just skip ahead a little bit here. But yeah, I didn't like Frankie in this movie either. Her role is basically to be a narrator, which I think was unnecessary. She had the same role in New Ghoul at School, and while I really didn't like that movie at all, I at least understood, firstly because it was a movie about Frankie, but then secondly because the use of narration had like a purpose. It made sense within the context of what was happening in that movie, and I do think that aside from the movie just being bad in my opinion, it could have been an effective storytelling tool, but in this movie the narration is completely unnecessary. Like, it just doesn't need to be there. It's so sporadic and random that whenever Frankie started talking, it honestly just took me out of what was happening in the movie because it was so unnecessary. And then if the movie was going to have narration and kind of rely on narration, I just wish that it wasn't Frankie. She has almost nothing to do in this movie. Like, she's almost a non-existent character, and she definitely doesn't do anything that other characters don't also do, but better. I just don't understand why. Okay, I do understand why Frankie's the narrator. It's because she's a main character, so they had to shoehorn her in somewhere. But that's what's frustrating to me, is that it's very obvious that her purpose in the movie and her place in the movie is just because she had to be there and not because she serves any real function or is of any real interest. If there was going to be a narrator, I think Claudine would have been a much, much better choice. She has a much more active role in the movie. She does a lot more in trying to get Draculaura and Claude back together, and she also is kind of a natural in-between the two characters because she's Draculaura's friend and she is Claude's sister. So she just would have been a much more natural feeling choice. Again, if there had to be narration. I would prefer there wasn't, but if there had to be narration, I think that Claudine would have made more sense as a narrator and would have felt more like she was there for a purpose instead of just feeling like she was there to fulfill like an obligatory role. Yeah, basically I feel like Frankie could have been written out of this movie, and I kind of wish she was, but she's popular, so she was the narrator. And that brings us to Draculaura, who I feel like is a pretty contentious character within this movie, and I definitely do understand why. Basically, I think that her motives and what's happening kind of in her head is extremely unclear. In the flashback sequence that we see that establishes that Draculaura and Valentine had been a couple, it's not explicitly stated if he had hypnotized her in the past or if she was just with him and was falling for him because he was using kind of non-magical charm. You know, like, it's not shown explicitly that he hypnotized her, so we don't really know if she's under a spell or if she was just like falling for this guy in a more natural sort of way. And I do think that that really muddies the waters for every other action that she takes within this movie, because if she was hypnotized and she never completely broke free of that spell, or like there's still some lingering vestiges of his power on her, then I feel like she can't be blamed for her actions necessarily. But if Dracula was never under Valentine's spell, then I do think she kind of acts inappropriately. Before Valentine comes back to the school, she's reminiscing about the good old days with him and how he was such a wonderful boyfriend and he was just so romantic with her. And if she's still under some sort of his power, that makes sense. But if she's not under any of his power, I do think it's kind of inappropriate for her to actively be fawning over her ex-boyfriend while she's with Claude. You know, like, she very clearly still has feelings for Valentine, and if those are wholly her own and not the result of a spell, I feel like it's a little bit shady of her to be with Claude at all if she has feelings like that strong for Valentine still. And then once Valentine comes to Monster High, it is like even worse, because before he definitely puts her under his spell, they're hanging out a lot. And I do know that people of all genders can be friends, like, I get it. But Draculaura and Valentine are not acting in a friend way. She is letting him flirt with her, letting him buy her gifts or like make her gifts out of his magic. She's letting like him be romantic towards her and call her cutesy nicknames, and they're together reminiscing about like having been a couple. So it's not that they're hanging out as friends, because that would be okay. They're very much towing the line between friendship and relationship, and obviously everybody's relationship is different, so I don't know within Claude and Draculaura's relationship whether this would technically be considered cheating for them, but it's on the line, you know, like, it, to me, it's kind of inappropriate behavior. And again, it's like, is she already under some sort of his power, or is Draculaura almost cheating with Valentine, you know? Obviously, after he actively does on screen put her under hypnosis, nothing she does after that point is her fault, because she's under hypnosis and it's a spell so powerful that Cupid's arrow can't break it. So like, after Valentine hypnotizes her, I don't blame Draculaura whatsoever. But before we see that on screen, she does things that to me are kind of morally questionable. And it made it hard for me to know whether I should be rooting for her or not, because, like, she's the leading lady, so you are supposed to be kind of in her corner and backing her. But I couldn't tell if she was being a good person or not, because I didn't know whether her motives were her own or whether they were tainted by Valentine's spell. So I don't really know what to think about Draculaura, and that's the problem. Like, I'm not necessarily complaining about her as a character, because she might have not been acting under her own volition, and I can't blame her or be upset at her for actions that she takes while she's under hypnosis, like under a spell. But because I don't know if she was or not, that's what I'm complaining about. I just think that the movie should have established much better whether Draculaura was hypnotized at all in the past. Like, if they had a whole flashback sequence, they very easily could have shown Valentine hypnotizing her, because they show him hypnotizing other girls, but they don't show him explicitly hypnotizing Draculaura. So that one scene, like, they could have added that one scene, and I would have understood that maybe there's still some vestige of that power left that is, like, tainting Draculaura's actions. But because I don't know that for sure, I don't know how to feel about her, and I just kind of think it's not a great thing in your movie to have me unsure of whether one of the main characters is a good person or not. So that is going to be the review. I do think that this is quite a bit shorter than some of my other reviews. Maybe not. Maybe I've been talking for a long time and it just doesn't feel like it. But I think it's a little bit shorter. Overall, I feel like I just had less thoughts about Why Do Ghouls Fall in Love than I did about other movies. I definitely don't hate it the same way I hated New Ghoul at School, but I don't think it was quite as good as Fright On. So, you know, it's okay. It wasn't terrible. I had some thoughts about it, which is fine, but it definitely wasn't the best. Still, though, since it wasn't, like, awful, we can look forward to the future with positivity. The next movie that is going to be up on my list to watch is Escape from Skull Shores, so definitely be on the lookout for that. If you've seen the movie, don't spoil anything, but definitely let me know what you think I'm going to think about it in the comments down below. I would also, like I said, love to hear your thoughts about what you thought about Why Do Ghouls Fall in Love, and then also your thoughts on my thoughts. I've said the word thought a lot, sorry. But yeah, that is going to be it for today, guys. I do hope you enjoyed. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day or your night or whatever it might be, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye, guys!